everyone. The drop zone was chaos wrapped in ceremony. Siraka 7's blistering atmosphere churned like boiling oil around the descending cadet shuttles. Each one carried a different squad, each from a distinct species, yet all bred and trained under the military doctrine of the Vorexian Compact. Today marked the beginning of Crucible Phase 9, a grueling survival assessment conducted on one of the most hostile moons in the sector. Over a dozen alien species had gathered. Their shuttles glided down like mechanical beasts, precise and elegant. As each door hissed open, out stepped towering Garrosh berserkers clad in crystalline armor, feathered Volari scouts with heat-reflective wing membranes, and six-eyed tactical Mentari twins already calculating optimal routes. The dry air vibrated with translated greetings, boasts and the occasional threat. And then came the final pod. Smaller, scarred from atmospheric re-entry. No insignia, no weapons. The door opened slowly, hydraulics groaning against the heat distortion. Out stepped a lone figure, 6'2", average build, wrapped in what appeared to be a patched desert cloak fashioned from discarded gear straps and woven rags. His boots were missing. The alien cadets blinked. The bio-readouts displayed one word on their HUDs: species human, designation Terran, organics only, combat rating, unknown. Laughter erupted across languages. Where is his cooling suit? A Drakari barked, mandibles clacking. No external hydration array? A skeptical Volari hissed. He'll be dead in 2 hours. Earthlings are soft, muttered a Garrosh brute, adjusting his gravhammer. He's here to die. Make it quick, ape. The human, Lieutenant Callum Rourke, United Terran Marines, 7th Expeditionary Unit, deceased, officially, said nothing. He merely squinted at the sky, spat in the dust and began walking. The command station in orbit, far above Siraka 7, crackled with data. Thermal imaging, behavior scans, neural latency readings. Everything streamed into Vorexian Central Command's Black Ops archive. Over a dozen species under test. One human. High Coordinator Nostal hovered beside the observation window, her opaline tendrils twitching with distaste. This Terran, you're certain this is the best their species had to offer? Her aide, a Mentari twin, nodded. Refugee from their warfront on Zeta Prime, declared dead in their records. Volunteered for the Crucible. No cybernetics. No enhancements. A joke, she muttered. Still, let the desert sort him out. By midday, heat levels had reached lethal intensity for most compact species. A squad of Volari lay unconscious under an outcrop, their wings seared. The Garrosh were burning through coolant at triple rate. Only the Mentari maintained formation, but even they seemed anxious. Callum Rourke, on the other hand, had found shade. A collapsed beetle husk, 3 meters wide, long since picked clean by scavengers, became his shelter. He sat within it, back straight, calmly pressing cactus flesh through a strip of porous cloth into a cracked canteen. He had found water, not just any water, filtered, solar-steeped, slow-dripped hydration. Nearby he had stabbed a femur-like bone into the sand at an angle, collecting condensation overnight. Primitive? Sure, but it worked. A trio of alien cadets spotted him and approached, intending mockery or maybe theft. A small bulbous Kalari slithered forward. You have no gear, Terran, no allies. Your kind fails alone. Callum didn't look up, yet here I am. You're delusional. Heatstroke. Maybe. Callum stood, slowly. In his hand was a shard of desert obsidian, filed down to a knife with a wrapped grip. I've got a shelter, water and tools, he said quietly. You've got sunburn and insults. Before the Kalari could retort, a sonic boom rocked the basin. They turned toward the horizon. One of the shuttles, Garrosh Squad Alpha, was engulfed in black smoke. A distant shriek cut through the wind. No one laughed now. Later that night, the remaining cadets gathered at the central relay, a triangular stone monolith that pulsed with alien glint. It was a communication point, supplying mission updates, biometric logs and psychological readouts to Compact Command. Tonight it displayed a stark message. Alert, 1 unit deceased, multiple MIA, relay uplink stable, evac status, not triggered, trial continues. A shadow fell over the monolith, The cadets turned to see Callum arriving late. He said nothing, his face shaded beneath a crude hood made from stitched beetle hide. He checked the glyph, nodded, turned to leave. Wait, snapped a feathered Volari. You saw the explosion. Callum paused. I saw the smoke, heard screaming. Do you know what happened? No idea, but I suggest you don't wait for help. Nobody's coming. But the rules. Callum stopped, facing them now. You really think this is that they're just grading you on endurance and teamwork? Wake up. We're pawns. They're watching how we break, not how we win. A heavy silence followed. From the shadows, a young Mentari stepped forward. Then what's your plan, Terran? Callum's gaze was flat, mine's simple. I don't die. From the orbital station, the observers were silent. Rewind the footage, said High Coordinator Nostal. Look at his hands, that shard. The tool, did he craft that without guidance? He used debris and native flora, the aide confirmed. Analyzing pattern. Predictive modeling suggests he's operating by ancestral memory, genetic trauma-based instinct. Fascinating, Nostal whispered. Keep watching. Let's see how long the desert takes to claim the last monkey. That night, as cadets huddled in powered tents that flickered under heat strain, Callum slept soundly beneath his beetle shelter, a net of cactus sinew tied above him to catch any condensation. His obsidian blade sat nearby. Bone stakes were lined around his camp like a primitive warning system. No tech, no light, just grit. In the distance, a second explosion rippled through the desert, and this time, he smiled. Cliffhanger transition. As the twin suns rose again, another squad's biometric data flatline. Command hushed the alert, but in the shifting sands just beyond the beetle shelter, a single intelligent eye opened beneath the dunes, watching Callum with predatory curiosity. Something native had noticed the human, and it wasn't the first thing Callum noticed when he woke was the absence of sound. No wind, no insect skitter, no cadet chatter through open comms, only the low hum of the desert's latent heat as it began to gather for the day's assault. He opened his eyes slowly, letting the glare of Soraka 7's twin suns bleed into his vision. Dust clung to his lashes, his skin now cracked and leathered, had shifted a shade closer to bronze. His mouth was dry but not dangerously so. Last night's condensation trap had caught just enough. He sat up, eyes sweeping across the perimeter he'd set the evening prior. 5 sharpened bone stakes from a vulture-like predator he'd found scavenged. Primitive but efficient. One of the stakes was disturbed, tracks just faint enough to suggest intelligence. Something had crawled within 2 meters of his shelter and backed away before dawn. Not one of the cadets. They left noise, dropped equipment, heat signatures. This was something else. Something native. Callum stood and began to stretch, feeling every vertebrae and scar protest. All right then, he muttered. Looks like I've got company. Elsewhere, panic was setting in. Several kilometers away, inside a portable shield dome now barely functional, 2 alien cadets argued in hushed tones. One, a high-strung Volari named Kirik, shook with exhaustion. The other, a Garash named Trovek, pounded the dome controls to no avail. Their water supply had evaporated, rations were spent, the heatsink was failing. What's the reading on the others? Kirik demanded, voice sharp and reedy. Trovek grunted. 3 more went dark last. They won't tell us how. No pickups, no evac. What kind of trial is this? It's not a trial anymore, Trovek muttered. It's a purge. They both looked toward the ridgeline, where with perfect timing, a plume of black smoke spiraled into the sky like a burning accusation. From that same direction, a single figure marched steadily across the dunes, covered in rags, carrying something slung over his back. The human. Callum had spent the morning scavenging, not for food but for material. He'd found the desiccated remains of a reptilian desert stalker, bleached bones still intact. Using a piece of thermoplastic melted from a cadet's broken visor, he'd bound the creature's femurs into an arching frame. It wasn't elegant, but it would serve as a frame for shelter expansion. But what mattered more were the cactus clusters he'd discovered, full of thick, pale pulp. Using jagged obsidian shards and a soaked strip of cloth, he created a crude press. Water, slow but steady, dripped into a shallow bowl made from the split carapace of the beetle he slept under. He wasn't just surviving, he was building. Up in orbit, the Voraxian command crew watched the footage with increasing discomfort. He's using native resources better than our pathfinders, muttered one technician. High Coordinator Nostal narrowed her eye. No compact cadet has made shelter integration from organic datrit. Not in this phase, the Mentari aide, eyes flickering with data overlays, added, the psychological metric is rising, the others are unraveling, the human is stabilizing. What? Pattern recognition, the aide answered, where others see chaos, the human sees ritual, routine. He's turning suffering into structure. That afternoon, a small scouting party approached Callum's camp. 3 cadets, the Mentari from before, a Kalari engineer, and a limping Alexei whose skin was cracking from dehydration. Callum heard them long before he saw them, the hiss of a failing coolant pack, the rhythm of uneven footsteps. He didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he poured a small amount of filtered cactus water into a cracked ration tin, and set it on the sand like an offering. The cadets froze, watched him. I'm not here to fight, Callum said, but I won't tarry anyone. You want in, you work, otherwise, go die quietly. The Mentari stepped forward first. What is this place? Camp Bones, Callum said dryly. Population, not dead. The others looked around, at the stakes, the shelter, the water trap. It was crude, yes, but it was working. You made all this? Asked the Kalari. I adapted. You should try it sometime. That night, as they sat huddled around a heat-venting rock, the closest thing to a campfire Sirocco 7 allowed, Callum taught them how to split cactus without poisoning themselves. He showed the Mentari how to use a thorn cluster to lash supports together. The Alexei was too weak to help, but she listened, learned. In the distance, something watched. A glint, a shimmer in the dark dunes. Callum noticed, said nothing. The next morning, the Kalari was gone. No sign of struggle, no blood, just the faint scuff of movement, and a single broken thorn. The camp stirred into frantic activity. He ran, the Mentari insisted. No, Callum said, eyes on the tracks. He was taken, by there's no predator this deep into the basin. Not a predator, Callum muttered. A scout. The group fell silent. What do you mean? Callum crouched, brushing the sand with his fingertips. I saw something last night, watching us. It knew we had shelter, water, number. That makes us a target. The Alexei shivered. So now we're prey. No, Callum said, standing. Now we're soldiers. Far beneath the sand, it moved. Thin, fast, almost translucent in its exoskeletal armor. The native species, still undocumented by the compact, had evolved to avoid sensors. It could mimic temperature gradients, mimic motion profiles, but it couldn't mimic strategy. And that was what Callum had, an edge sharpened by Earth's violent history of survival, conquest and war. He began laying traps, pitfalls disguised as cooling vents, bone shards buried under soft sand, a perimeter alarm made of cactus chimes, strung between sharpened femur, and still, one by one, cadets outside the camp were vanishing, not dying in combat, not from dehydration, vanishing. The breaking point came 3 days later. A group of 4 Volari approached the camp at dusk, clearly injured, one missing a wing, one dragging a severed limb. Help us, they cried. Please. Callum watched them closely. Where's the rest of your squad? Dead, ambushed. The ground opened up. The Mentari moved to help, so did the Alexei, but Callum raised a hand. No, why not? The Alexei. He pointed to the sand beneath the Volari's feet. Look at the way the sand moves. Those aren't real injuries. The facade broke. In a flash 2 of the Volari dropped their disguise, revealing the exoskeletal creatures within. Ambush units. They had used alien bodies like shell, but the camp wasn't defenseless anymore. As they surged forward, 2 of them tripped on rigged lines, falling into pits. The Mentari activated a crude trap Callum had designed, a collapsing shelter spike that impaled the second attacker. The last one lunged straight at Callum. He didn't run. He stepped inside the creature's momentum, cooked its mandibles with his obsidian blade, and ripped. It screamed, a high glassy shriek before collapsing. Silence fell again. The Alexei was frozen. They're using us. Callum wiped his blade clean. No, they're testing us. Who is? He looked up toward the sky. The ones watching, back in orbit. The Varaxian observers were losing control. That wasn't part of the trial, an analyst said. That species isn't even in our database. They're responding to the camp's growth. Another ad. We triggered a natural territorial response. Nistel stared at the footage. And yet the human endures. The aide, hesitant now, offered. He's not just enduring. He's leading. Alien cadets are following his methods, mimicking his designs, sharing water. So, he's rewriting the crucible. That night, Callum added new stakes to the perimeter, sharpened mandibles from the dead native, mounted like warning flags. Why do you do that? The Mentari asked. Why decorate with bone? Because bones remind you of one thing, Callum said, not looking up. What's that? That you're still alive. Cliffhanger transition. As the cadets slept, now fewer, now hardened, a new message flickered across the monolith. Directive change. Love extraction of Terran subject, prohibited. Termination protocol initiated. Somewhere above, another shuttle began its descent, but it wasn't here to rescue, it was here to erase. At precisely 0317 local time, the stars blinked out. Callum was on watch when it happened, eyes peeled to the high sky where Siraka 7's twin suns still lingered on the horizon like dying embers. One moment, the familiar constellations pulsed overhead, the next, a wedge of unnatural blackness smeared across them, blotting stars like spilled oil. He stood. That wasn't a cloud, wasn't a storm, it was something descending, silent, massive, and engineered to be invisible. From the distance, the monolith's glyphs flared crimson. Crucible protocol, Phase 4 override, all remaining units, no exfiltration. This is no longer a test. Elsewhere in the basin, the last semblance of order crumbled. The Korvax pod, once 12 strong, known for their ritualistic chain of command, had splintered into feral duels. Half had already consumed their own emergency rations to toxic levels, the other half were hunting fellow cadets for fluid extraction. Near the canyon ridge, a Valari squad was down to one, its final scout pacing in frantic circles, reciting poetry into a broken translator, feathers molting under stress. Siraka 7 had become a mirror for the worst in every species, except one. In Camp Bones, unity reigned, barely. The cadets that remained under Callum's guidance were tired, wounded, paranoid, but alive. They had shelter, traps, routine, water, thanks to Callum's increasing expertise with Cactus processing, and a makeshift solar still built from scavenged reflective panels. Yet as that black shape grew closer overhead, something shifted. Trust began to crack. I saw you signal, Yalexi whispered. Her voice was hoarse, eyes sunken. Last night, with the bone chime, you sent a code. Callum raised an eyebrow. What kind of code? You tapped 4 times, pause, then 3, same as the relay beacon frequency. You summoned them. Callum saw. I was resetting the trap perimeter. The chimes click and wind. No, she hissed. You're with them. You were planted here. A weapon. A test to break us. Others were listening now. The Mentari froze. A Drakare, silent since his injury, tightened his grip on a bone spear. This again, Callum muttered. She's scared, the Mentari said gently. We all are. She's trying to fracture the only working camp left in this hellhole. That's not fear, that's sabotage. Tension crackled like static. Then came the scream, not from within, from the canyon wall just beyond the camp. Sharp, choking, alien. The Mentari bolted up. That's a Gorash call. They're never alone. Callum didn't hesitate. He grabbed his spear and ran toward the noise, not to rescue, but to see, to assess. The others followed, some out of duty, others curiosity, all sensing the stakes had changed. At the edge of the canyon, they found the Gorash, or what was left. The cadet's massive armored body had been peeled open, not crushed, not mauled, delicately, surgically, like something had wanted to study him alive. Ribbed plates lay beside him, like discarded armor. His tongue was missing, and in his hand, a shard of obsidian, carved with marks. Callum took it, held it to the light. It was a crude imitation of his knife. The creature had seen his design, and it was learning. In orbit, chaos reigned in the Voraxian control station. Shuttle 8 is off-grid. No telemetry from Camp Theta. Seismic activity increasing around Zone Delta. That's not terrain shift. That's movement. Nustel stood motionless. What about the human? Alive, Yade confirmed. Leading, surrounded by 3 cadets. 2 more, inbound from splintered factions, all gathering at Camp Bones. And the native, we believe it has, duplicated his methods. Camouflage, spear mimicry. One even used Cactus for hydration before killing a cadet. Nustel hissed. So now it's not just learning, it's emulating. That's contamination beyond recovery. What are your orders? Her tendrils curled like fangs. We sterilize the basin, and the Terran with it. Back at camp, the group splintered. Alexei vanished by dusk. No note,
No noise, just her cloak left hanging on a thorn. A Druckery duo departed shortly after, mumbling about the dishonor of hiding behind bone. They took 2 spears, and 1 half-charged plasma cell, last seen heading toward the canyon's edge. Calum said nothing, he just sharpened his blade, but the Mentari finally snapped. Say something, they're breaking apart. Calum didn't look up. It's not my job to stop them. My job is to survive. If they want to die heroic, let them. You brought us together, I didn't ask to. The Mentari glared. Then why did you help us? A long pause, then Calum said quietly, because it was the human thing to do. That night, the desert lit up. A massive arc of plasma tore through the sky, as Shuttle 8 entered the lower atmosphere in violation of Compact Trial Protocol. It wasn't coming to land, it was coming to clear. From its underbelly, automated drones rained down in coordinated sweep formations, black, beetle-shaped buzzers, with lethal payloads, and orders to erase all biological contamination. The Voraxian Compact had declared Siraka 7 compromised. The crucible was over, everyone was now expendable. Camp Bones went dark. Calum ordered every reflective panel buried, heat sources quenched, water traps sealed. They covered everything with sand and netting woven from Cactus, Sino and Volare feathers. The first drones passed overhead, oblivious, but the creatures beneath the sand, they weren't. They attacked the drones mid-air, leaping with clawed precision, tearing them apart. The sky became a ballet of fleck, sand and burning circuitry. One drone, crashing half alive, landed near the camp's edge. Calum and the Mentari rushed it, salvaging the active beacon and stuffing it deep into a bone pit trap. It detonated, but the sand muffled the blast. When the smoke cleared, a new glyph flickered on the monolith. Phase 5 termination failed. Unauthorized tactical intervention detect. Ground element Terran, marked as strategic threat. Calum stared at the message, then laughed. Now they're scared of me. 2 days passed in heat and silence. Factions arrived at Camp Bones, no longer mocking, no longer proud, just survivors, humbled, desperate. Gorosh, Volare, even a silent pair of Korvax, their bodies still bloodstained from intra-squad battles, and all of them turned to the human, not because he was strongest, not because he was alien, but because he was still inside his tent. The Mentari found the shard again, the one with copied markings. They'd compared it with Calum's blade. The angles matched, even the grip. She stared at him across the firelight. If they're mimicking us, what happens when they learn strategy?
8-2. Calum didn't answer right away. Just stared out across the dunes where bones marked old fights, where cactus walls shimmered with heat and blood. They already have, he said finally. Now they're watching to see who wins. At dawn the sand shifted again. But it wasn't just movement, it was formation. Hundreds, maybe thousands of those native things began rising from the earth, not as scattered predators, but as a coordinated army. And at their front, one wearing a cloak of beetle hide, holding a bone spear with cactus string lashing, the exact same design as Calum's. A mimic. A message. We learned. Your move. Cliffhanger transition. As Camp Bones scrambled to prepare, the monolith flared one last time. A new glyph none of the compact cadets recognized. But Calum did. It was Terran. Old military code. And it said, "Reinforcements inbound. Stand by for contact. Earth knows." The sky turned the color of bruised iron. It began with static in the air. A prickling in the lungs. An invisible weight pressing on the chest. Then the winds rose like ghosts set loose, lifting grains of red dust until the entire basin became a churning cauldron of blinding, rust-colored fury. Siraka 7's infamous thermal storm. The scorchwind had arrived weeks ahead of seasonal predictions. Calum stood on the ridge, cloak flapping violently, goggles locked tight against the rising haze. The dunes below twisted like ocean waves, and the walls of Camp Bones trembled under the force of wind that could flay skin from bone. Behind him nearly 24 cadets scrambled, stacking beetle shells against bone stakes, covering the solar traps with woven cactus nets, tightening lashings on shelters that groaned in protest. They had one rule now. Don't die, stupid. Inside the central shelter, reinforced with overlapping rib bones and scavenged alloy, the atmosphere was tense, not because of the storm, Because of the numbers, 22 cadets. Supplies meant for maybe 6. Water traps compromised. Drones salvaging impossible now. And most critical of all, no escape plan. We can't ride this out for 3 days, the Mentari whispered, crouched beside Callum, poring over their crude map, a stitched patchwork of beetle hide and cactus ink. We're exposed from the north. North's not the problem anymore, Callum muttered. He pointed to the southeast quadrant. What is that? Not what, he said. Who? The mimic army had disappeared into the storm, but their absence was too perfect, too quiet. They were using the storm, hiding in its folds, learning from humans not just how to survive, but how to strategize. Far above, the Vorexian command center was fragmenting. Control protocols failed. Uplink relays shorted from sand interference. Orbital drones blinded by electrostatic pulses. But worse, far worse was the chatter from deep space. Earth's Deep Space Command had answered the Terran signal. An unauthorized field lock detected. UTM Task Force Theta Iron inbound. You had one human. Now you have a war. Nossel watched her screens go dark. One by one. She didn't blink. They're coming, she said. Her aide, eyes wide, said only, and they won't be polite. Inside Camp Bones, the cadets braced for hell. The Gorash manned the wall. The Volari reinforced the tunnels. Even the Korvax, once aloof, took orders from Callum without hesitation. He taught them to feel the storm, not fight it. Use its rhythms, mask heat signatures with cactus resin, use wind drift to scatter false trails. They'd turned cactus thorns into flechette mines, and lured native predators into choke points with the bones of their own. Each shelter had one order. Don't play hero. If you see something move, you signal, not stab, unless it gets inside the perimeter. That night, something did. The storm hit its peak at 0300. The sky was a furnace, the wind, a chorus of tortured voices. Visibility was 0. Inside the medical shelter, the Alexi twitched in her fever sleep. The Mentari sat beside her, administering a cactus-based saline through a slowly dripping funnel. That's when she heard the clicking, not from outside, from inside. A slow, deliberate mimicry of Kalari speech, spoken in cadence, but not in voice. She froze. Behind the beetlehide flap something shifted. Code word, she whispered. Silence. Then the flap exploded inward. A mimic, draped in Alexi armor, lunged. The Mentari screamed, fumbling for her bone dagger. The mimic was faster, too fast, but not smarter. As it struck, a hidden spring trap under the bedding fired, slamming a sharpened spike into its midsection. It shrieked, fell backward, and was torn apart by 6 cadets who had been waiting in silence. Trap within a trap. Callum's design. By morning, 5 shelters were damaged, 2 cadets dead, but 20 remained. More importantly, they held. The storm waned, visibility returned, and just beyond the dunes, the mimic army stood. Not attacking, not charging, but watching. Hundreds of them, maybe more. They were learning again. Callum climbed the signal ridge that afternoon. The comm beacon they'd hidden in the bone pit had one job: relay human-coded pulse bursts toward Deep Space Command. It had been repeating the same message for 2 days. Now it blinked green. Callum's face hardened. Earth response received. Task Force arrival. T-4 hours. He looked to the sky and smiled. The cadets gathered for the first official council that evening. Seated in a half-circle, they watched as Callum drew patterns in the sand. Tactical lines, diversion paths, fallback shelters. He split the group into 3 units, not by species, by function. You've all been trained in theory, but here, we're rewriting the doctrine. They know your species' weaknesses. They've studied compact strategy. He paused, looked each of them in the eye. But they don't know mine. What's your strategy? Asked Agora. Callum stood, walked to the edge of the cliff, looked out over the dunes where bones shimmered in the heat haze. We hit first. At 200-300, Camp Bones emptied. Only decoys remained. Bones posed as guards. Cactus bundles shaped like gear piles. The real survivors had circled around the basin, navigating by smell, memory and storm-sheltered paths. At the base of the canyon wall, where the mimics nested, they waited. Callum gave the signal. The Gorash dropped flares made of phosphorus and dried cactus resin. The Volari launched shard nets to seal exits. The Mentari hacked the drone wreckage to release static bursts that mimics had been using to coordinate. And Callum led the charge, bone blade in one hand, a scavenged plasma cutter in the other. They didn't fight for glory, they fought to be remembered. In orbit, the Voraxians watched helplessly. They saw a human commanding 12 alien species, like they were one unit, saw coordinated strikes based on guerrilla patterns, psychological feints, and adaptive strategy. And then they saw something else. The sky opened. A thunderclap split the heavens. 3 massive vessels dropped through atmosphere. Terran warships, marked with UTM insignia, and bristling with cannons. Earth had arrived, and it hadn't come to negotiate. The mimic army, cornered, began to retreat, but it was too late. Callum and his cadets collapsed the canyon mouth, buried the nest, and from the dust rose a new banner, not of any one world, but of those who survived together. Aliens looked at the human and didn't see a primitive anymore. They saw a command cliffhanger transition. As the survivors gathered beneath the descending UTM gunships, the Mentari pulled Callum aside. "There's something you need to see," she said, handing him a drone fragment. Embedded in the circuitry was a Voraxian command code, and a single Terran designation. "Let it, Callum Rourke. Terminate." On retrieval, they weren't done with him yet, and now Earth knew. The landing gear of the UTM gunship slammed into Soraka 7's cracked earth like a judge's gavel. Heat rippled off its hull, scalding the sand and vaporizing what little moisture remained. The dust hadn't settled from the mimic war before Earth's wrath descended, a triumvirate of iron and fire against the sky. These were no rescue vessels, these were enforcers. Callum stood before the crowd of battered cadets, as hatches hissed, and ramps lowered. From the darkness emerged soldiers, Terran Special Operations, Phase 5, armor matte black, helmets sealed, weapons raised, but not aimed. The lead trooper stepped forward, helmet lifted, a woman, cold eyes, voice like steel over gravel. "Let it, Callum Rourke." Callum nodded once. "Present." She tossed him a sealed chip, Terran coded, red trimmed. "Orders." He caught it, scanned it, and his jaw tightened. The mission wasn't over. Inside the lead gunship, things moved fast. The interior was a command post wrapped in a coffin, tight corridors, data screens, real-time uplinks. Callum sat alone across from 3 ranking officers. No insignia, just presence. "You broke protocol," one said. "You sent me to die." Callum replied. Another leaned forward. "You were sent to observe. You initiated contact. You transmitted off schedule. You violated Directive 9. I saved 24 lives. I uncovered hostile intelligence. I exposed a species the Voraxians couldn't even detect. You made yourself a target. I made Earth a player." A pause. Then the third officer, an old man, eyes like frozen oceans, spoke. "Good." Back in orbit, the Voraxian compact was in shambles. Footage leaked. Their sterilization orders revealed the mimic species, once a footnote in scouting logs, had proven more adaptive than anticipated. Worse, now the Terrans were involved. Nistal watched planetary footage flicker across command displays. The cadets were forming an alliance. Their psychology was shifting, not toward rebellion but toward Terran methods, unity through hardship, not hierarchy. And in every report, one name echoed like a warning. Rourke. They had underestimated the human. Now they would fear him. In the shattered remnants of camp bones, the survivors gathered again, not as cadets, but comrades. The Mentari had decoded more of the drone chip. What it revealed was sickening. The entire trial had been a facade, a long-term biometric warfare experiment. The Voraxians had seeded mimic DNA into earlier species trials, crossbred it, observed it mutate. The crucible was never a test of survival. It was a test of how long species would last, before breaking one another apart. The storm, the drone, even the terrain anomalies, all simulations within simulations. And the human, Callum had been their ultimate data point, the unpredictable variable, the X factor. But he didn't break, he converted. The Terrans offered extraction to the cadets, but not Earth didn't trust them yet, so Callum did what he always did. He improvised. He pulled together a plan. The mimic tunnels stretched for miles beneath Soraka 7. Within them were entire data nests, organic hive nodes, that stored visual, scent and kinetic memory. If they could be accessed, they might hold the entire history of the Voraxian experiments, proof Earth could use to dismantle the Compact's stranglehold over interspecies law. But it meant going back underground, into the dark, where no cadet had returned. The operation began at 0300 local time. Callum led a team of 7, 2 Gorosh, 1 Mentari, 1 Valari, 1 Alexei, 1 silent Korvax, and 1 human. No tech heavier than portable scramblers and pulse lights, no maps, only they dropped into the tunnel shaft, under the broken canyon wall, where the mimic leader had once stood wearing Callum's own design. The descent was silent. The walls breathed. And then, the voices began. Mimic tunnels didn't echo. They reflect. Sound bounced back in altered cadence, a chorus of former cadet screams, orders, and even lullabies. The mimic intelligence had recorded every emotional resonance, stored them in organic audio nodules, a library of fear. The Korvax almost broke, but Callum pressed on. At the core they found the nest mind, a pulsing sphere of translucent bone, riddled with bioluminescent tendrils, and twitching sensory limbs. The Mentari approached first. Synaptic architecture matches triple cortex logic webs. It's not a mind, it's accounts. Callum stared into it, and for the first time, felt it stare back. Then it spoke, not aloud, but through memory replay. It showed the first trials, the Voraxians in white coats, the testing chambers, the spliced DNA, the mimic agony. Then came the betrayal. Compact soldiers burning nests, sterilizing juveniles, labeling them pests. And finally it showed Callum, sitting beneath a beetle shell, crafting a spear, pulling life from death, and the mimic learning hope. He staggered back, breath ragged. They weren't born hunters, he whispered. They were made that way. The Mentari nodded. Engineered, like us, but we broke free. The others stood in reverent silence. Callum made a choice. They would not destroy the nest mine. They would send it, a fragment of it, to Earth, encrypted within a Terran deep core beacon. Let the politicians sort it out. The war had already begun. 3 days later, aboard the Terran vessel, Blackthorn, Callum stood before the viewport. Soraka 7 was behind them now, a scar on a map. Beside him stood the Mentari, and the Valari, the beginnings of something new. Command wants a full report, she said. He nodded. I'll give them one, but, he smiled faintly, I won't give them everything. Cliffhanger transition. As the Blackthorn entered warp, a final encrypted message pulsed from Soraka 7's core. New nest established. Adaptation continues. Prenairing template. Human. The mimics were evolving, and the next time they emerged, they would not be predator, they would be tactician.